We'll call the meeting of the Diversion Board of Authority to order. Begin with the roll.
Mr. Bagno?
Here.
Mr. Pollock?
Here.
Mr. Thorsted?
Here.
Mr. Olson?
Here.
Dr. Mahoney?
Here.
Ms. Sobolik? Here. Mr. Williams? Mr. Campbell? Ms. Otto?
Here.
Next item, you have before you the minutes from last meeting.
Move to approve.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Order of agenda, anything to add or change?
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the order of agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Management report? Bruce?
Okay, give a overview for our May report. Ongoing work in April, the first part of May, continuing design work on the in-town levees, and also preparing bid documents for the first flood wall section that will be going out a little later this summer. Also continuing design work on both the Elzagle section and the Mickelson section of the project. Design is also continuing for the Oxbow Hickson Backey. The work package 43B is being designed by the Corps, and that is 95% complete. 43C is being designed by Houston Moore Group, and that review is going to be starting in June. We had scheduled work package 43D bid opening for next Tuesday. That's been out for bid for about 3 weeks now, but we'll be issuing later this evening an addendum which is going to cancel that bid due to the preliminary injunction order that was issued yesterday that I think Eric's going to talk about in his section. The other highlights are the Maple River Aqueduct, continuing to work on that. The diversion inlet structure, the Corps is got a 65% complete on that. We're also looking at maintenance needs in the O&M building that will be part of that structure. Will be the Diversion Authority will be giving the Corps input on that next week. The associated or nearby County Road 16 and County Road 17 road and bridge realignments are also in the preliminary design phase. Those have to be realigned because of the location of the diversion inlet structure. Continuing to work with Minnesota DNR on the EIS, responding to information requests. I think the draft EIS has slipped 1 or 2 days since the last month, but it's still in August, just right at that last week of August. Cultural cemetery surveys. I think Terry's going to talk a little bit about that. We've completed the field work on 7 of them. We've got one recent additional right of entry for North Pleasant Cemetery, and that field work has just started. We still did not get right of entry on 3 of the cemeteries. Construction, working on the pump stations, primarily the structural walls coming up and some of the hydraulic walls coming up on the 2nd Street pump station, 4th Street pump station, walls and utilities. There will be a change order that I'll be presenting a little bit later down in the agenda for the 4th Street pump station. Oxbow Hickson Backey ring levee, we have 7 houses under construction. The development work has resumed. Curb and gutter work and paving is getting underway for that portion of the project. some aerial photos showing Second Street pump station here. Get a little bit more of a close-up there so you can see the walls coming up, both the exterior walls and some of the interior hydraulic walls on the pump station. And then 4th Street pump station looking somewhat similar, a little bit not as advanced as the 2nd Street pump station. Work going down in the development of Oxbow Hicks-and-Baki Ring Levee. This is the location of the Gatewell project, and where work package 43 was going to begin. Since we are not going to have that construction going on this summer, at the joint board meeting today, we did get authorized to engage in a erosion control contractor just to maintain that site, since we won't be turning it over to our main construction contractor for this summer's work. And then you can see we've got 6 houses that are fairly far along, and then 1 foundation just going in this photo, so a recent start on that. And these are on the south end of Riverbend Road. So coming up, continuing to work, got a meeting next week with State Water Commission. Be working with the Corps on a 404 permit, continuing to work on reviews of portions of the draft EIS that will be being put out by the DNR. A lot of coordination with the Corps on the public-private partnership. I have a meeting next week with them, coordinating with the cemetery mitigation plan and other designs, continuing work on the in-town levies. We do have a public meeting on May 19th for the Oxbow Hicks-and-Baki community that had been scheduled to discuss the construction that'll be going on in this summer. We still intend to have that meeting and just talk about the activities we will and will not be doing this summer. So just trying to give a lot of education to the residents down there that are wondering what's going to be going on. Continued design, land acquisition, and then housing construction. So talked about the public meeting. This was going to be the construction that was going on. It was primarily going to be storm drainage, pump station, gate well, and the outfall, with only about 700 feet of levee constructed. So that's the work package that's been put on hold right now. We had a number of packages going out for bid. You can see the first one, the one that's being canceled, but then a lot of the construction work that was planned for this summer and is planned for this summer is associated with the in-town levies, so those will all continue as planned and on schedule. So, if there's any questions? All right, I think
No
Terry's
questions.
going to give the Corps report.
Thanks, Bruce.
Good afternoon. Monthly update this month. I'm going to primarily be talking about the cemetery mitigation planning that's been going on. For in-town levies, we've recently and continue to review Mickelson, Elzagle Phase 2, and the South 2nd Street floodwall projects. Minnesota DNR EIS. The review of the entire draft by the sponsors and the Corps of Engineers starts in June. It's about a month-long process. And the public release is still scheduled for late August and, of course, is subject to change. Our plan for surveys this year and through the winter is to complete all remaining surveys on the diversion channel and the southern embankment in North Dakota. Of course, we don't have any rights of entry in Minnesota, So we'll complete everything in North Dakota, and that includes borings and testing, Phase 1 cultural, and HTRW. And the map shown is the most current rights of entry map that displays if letters have been sent, if right of entry's been granted, if it's expired, if it's been court ordered, or if the project owns the property. And there's a copy of this on the back of the monthly handout for you. Cemetery study. This is a map you all have seen many times, and it shows where all of the potentially impacted cemeteries are upstream of the project. And I'd like to point out, there's a 2-page, it's actually 4 pages, but a handout for you. We went over this pretty extensively at land management.
You
And
all
this-
have this in front of you.
And this summarizes all the work that's been done to study cemeteries and formulate a mitigation plan. Under number 1, it goes over the timeline, all of the work that's been done since September of 13 to determine what impacts might be and what existing cemeteries do out there right now to mitigate impacts. And it talks about all the cultural surveys that we've done and the reports, the wonderful reports that have been generated for the sites that have granted rights of entry for us. These surveys are pretty important. They document the history of the site, and they are also provided to the SHPOs, Minnesota and North Dakota, so that they are aware of each site. And at the bottom of the page is a table showing the alternatives that have been studied to date for mitigation. And this is kind of a brief summary of those mitigation alternatives that have been looked at. So protective berms, that's what's shown on the picture. And that one is for the Lower Wild Rice and Red River Cemetery. And if you install protective berms at 10 of the 11 sites, cost approximately $11 million. And those berm heights range from 1.3 feet to 16 feet. Access is an issue. It's currently an issue out there for most of the cemeteries. If you provide access to 5 sites, it's about $3 million. Debris fencing and anchoring monuments, that's an alternative thought of to try to help prevent debris from floating into the site. And then if you anchor the monuments, you can further protect against that. The thing with debris fencing is a lot of these sites have tree lines already, so they already serve as kind of a debris fence. And another alternative was raising sites. There's 4 sites that you could probably raise, and that would be to a foot above the staging elevation. That's about $1.4 million. And the other alternatives we looked at were no action. We always look at no action, and flowage easements and assisting with cleanup after project operation. More information on these protective berms. As you can see, they're pretty extensive. This one would be about 16 feet high, and cemeteries are generally located at intersections of roads. So you raise the roads to serve as the berm, and then for interior drainage, there's ditching and a temporary pump inside of a gate wall. You've got to bring power out to run the pump unless it's gas powered. So these are pretty extensive, and people ask, well, why are they so expensive? And that's why. Part of the planning process is for the federal government to do a takings analysis. And that's been done, and it's been determined that the impacts caused by the project do not rise to the level of being a taking under the Fifth Amendment. And this lists why. None of the induced flooding would be more frequent once every 10 years because we don't operate till a 10-year event. 2 cemeteries that would be impacted at a 10-year event, the impacts are pretty small. They're about 1/10 of a foot. And past flooding has caused minimal damage. And for less frequent events like the 5 or the 50 and the 100 year, the duration's pretty limited and infrequent. So with that, the federal mitigation for cemeteries is flowage easements on sites inside the staging area, just as we're doing for agricultural property inside the staging area. The technical team from the Diversion Authority, we've been working side by side, of course, the Corps and the sponsors. In addition to the easements, they are recommending or considering assisting with cleanup. And of course, this is all draft. I have to repeat that. One thing that we've talked about from a cultural standpoint is putting permanent physical mitigation features in, such as protective berms and fencing, really kind of takes away from the historic integrity of that site. So that's a consideration that we've taken also. If you go out to a cemetery and part of the beauty is looking out over the river or whatever, and instead you're looking at a 16-foot levee, that's an impact. So the next steps, we promised and committed to sending out a draft plan in June, and that's what we're going to do. On June 8th, it should go out to the POCs of each cemetery, and we're also sending it out to the SHPOs. And we're going to request comments from everybody by the end of June. The Diversion Authority, I think, after talking at Land Management this morning, has some more work that they want to do on what the authority is going to proceed with. Path forward, still Minnesota EIS, get those surveys done, keep designing, keep reviewing, keep finalizing designs, and advancing the P3 split delivery process for this project. That's it for the Corps of Engineers report.
Thank you. Any questions? Later on, when we have the land management update, we did, in that committee, approve the release of these reports on June 8th, and we'll wait until that time and then ask this board to do the same. Anything else on that? Okay, we have a County Commissioner, Chad Peterson, who's going to give us an update. This goes back, and I'm sure Chad will explain it, I guess, the previous economic development impact of the communities for this region, and I'll just turn it over to you, Chad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, my name is Chad Peterson. I'm actually currently the chair of the Cass County Commission. Before you, you have a handout, and this is an updated report that some of you have seen, and which is why I'm here. Some of you have not. Within that report, you'll see a bunch of data, and I'll go through that momentarily, along with some help from our EDC friends, Mr. Garten. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Jim Garten with the EDC, John Mahachek, and Martha Bartels for helping me out, as well as Mr. Schneider from AE2S, and helping us recompile what was compiled back in 2009. So, what do you have before you? You have an updated report that was prepared back in 2009 by then Commissioner Scott Wagner, as well as our friends from the EDC. The primary driver was, I believe, Mary Batchelor. And within that report, you will see a bunch of data. Why is it important? Well, that's why I'm here. I am here specifically because, most importantly, we've had a lot of turnover in public office, not just locally, but regionally. I was elected 2 years ago, and prior to my election, I didn't know this report existed. In fact, I found out about it about a year ago. This is one of the most important things I could have known and probably should have known, which was my fault, not anyone else's, prior to my election and as serving as a county commissioner. I testified before the state legislature last session and this session regarding highway funding, infrastructure funding, and things like that, in particular the surge bills and everything going on out west, as well as everything going here. Part of my testimony was very important. Between 2010 and 2013, roughly 13,000 people moved to Cass County. I believe history begins the day you're born. I believe history begins in the town the day you move there. So just with U.S. Census data, we have 13,000 people that moved here between 2010 and 2013 that have no idea what 2009 was. My house was a couple blocks north of here in 2009. I had Black Hawk helicopters flying over with the sandbags that were set in to protect Oak Grove. Some of my neighbors never saw that. And it's not some, it's actually a lot. There's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people in this region that have no idea what the real struggle and tumult in digging this ditch is about. They think it's a ditch to protect 3 mansions in South Fargo and make a bunch of rich people richer. That is not the case. Now, jumping into the report, I'm not going to take a lot of your time because, again, some of you have seen this, some of you haven't. For lack of a better term, the smaller portion is your cheat sheet. This is a pretty good summary of what's in the larger package, which is the PowerPoint presentation. And I'm going to reference that for you right now because the most important part of this PowerPoint presentation is one page. And it's actually page 15. And I apologize, we don't have this for you on PowerPoint, but suffice it to say this report will be on the Diversion website. EDC will be getting it to our friends at AA2S, and we'll publish it. This is the most important part of this entire report. I'm a snapshot person, a bullet point person. With this sheet, it tells you who works here. The diversion's purpose isn't to protect a handful of people. It's to protect a lot of people's jobs and what has become a $15 billion economy. The second page I'll reference is a couple pages prior, page 11, and that gives you, there's a small chart in the bottom right-hand corner of that which actually summarizes these numbers, but this gets a better chance for all of us to read it. Just across the river, why does Minnesota care? Why should they care about protecting a handful of people in South Fargo? It doesn't protect a handful of people in South Fargo. It protects roughly 13,377 jobs. Friends of ours that come from Clay County over to Cass to work. Are all of them going to be in the protected area? Certainly not. That would be a lie. But there's a big chunk of them that do. And if the water comes and those jobs go away and those buildings go away, those people across the river are unemployed. And per a director of FEMA, or one of the FEMA's administrators here about a month ago, he said his best case scenario was a 70% return. After a catastrophe, your local economy will return to 70% of what it was. That's a best case scenario. Further, we jump down to the smaller portions. Our friends in Richland County, why do they care about Fargo? Well, 1,872 people come north to work. According to the U.S. Census, 6,269 people have jobs in Richland County. So, do some quick math. 20% of their population works here. So if you don't care about Fargo, I disagree with you, but I understand. You should care about your neighbors that work here. And it's not 10 people, it's not 15 people, it's almost 2,000. Further, which actually, some of these numbers actually surprised me, that we have 2,000 people that come down from Grand Forks. We have 1,400 people that. But let's jump across the river for a moment. Again, why should Minnesota care about Fargo? Well, in Becker County, we see that 1,400 people come here to work. Again, it's not tens of people, it's over 1,000. And as a percentage of their population, workforce, it's roughly 10%. And again, I think we can all agree 2013 numbers, they're probably old, probably a little bit less, or probably a little bit more now than they were in 2013. In Otter Tail County, 1,000 people come in. Polk, 700. Norman, 400. Wilkin, 150. And Grant, 102. And obviously in the more rural counties, whether it's North Dakota or Minnesota, when you're in the hundreds, you're talking a greater percent of the overall population that work here. This is why this report is important. Because we're not protecting Fargo. By default, I say we are. Sure, we're protecting some land. But what we're doing is protecting what is a regional economy. And that is far more important than the messaging of protecting a handful of people that own a little bit of land in South Fargo. If we go under, this region suffers. An overall budget, I think we're at $50 billion in the state of North Dakota. We're roughly 30% of that in Fargo. If we go away, because we have 40-some feet of devastating water walk through our community, the state of North Dakota will suffer. And that will impact our friends in Minnesota just as much as it impacts us. And talking about numbers, Mr. Garden, you are the money man. I will yield the mic to you, and then when he's done, I'll step back up, close it off, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you. Back in 2010, we were asked to do, and then it's been updated, a case study. And we currently have approximately 220 to 230 what we call primary sector businesses in Cass and Clay County. About 90% of those are on the Cass County side, about 10% are on the Clay County side. And what we did was take a composite of those 220 plus companies and selected a hypothetical manufacturing company to use as an example of what the impact would be if in fact we had that type of a flood situation. And the characteristics of that company is that we saw annual revenues of about $16,500,000. Number of employees would be about 150, and the average annual salary would be about $38,000. What we did was do a calculation and estimated loss to the area over a 20-year period to look at the economic output. And direct operating costs, it would be about $443 million, indirect and induced, which is indirect, meaning those companies that would support those employees, both through service and retail type of jobs, and induced would be the new employees that would be a part of that growth of that company if it had not have been shut down. So the total output loss would be about $584 million. The 150 jobs and the 48 indirect and induced jobs that I just explained would also have an impact. The direct payroll would be about $153 million, and the indirect and induced would be about $34 million, so for a total payroll loss of about $188 million. That all has economic impact in relationship to sales tax, real estate tax. So the taxes, as we work through those numbers, and loss of sales tax collected would be $3,464,000, personal income taxes $4,789,000, and state corporate income taxes about $3,275,000. Miscellaneous revenues for state and local taxing districts and federal government would be another $6 million, for a total loss of about $14,700,000. That's one company. So if we did have that type of 40-foot situation that Commissioner Peterson was talking about, you know, how many of those companies would it affect? As we look through the floodplain and where the locations are, you know, it would probably be in that 80 to 100 companies, maybe a little bit more, depending on, you know, how that all works through the process, if it is where it is right now and nothing else is done. So you just have to do a calculator using those numbers times, let's say, 100, to give you an idea of what the economic impact would be for the loss of something like this. If we look at our counterparts in Grand Forks, and of course most recently in Minot, Grand Forks economy is still probably down about 27% from where it was before the flood. Minot is, you know, luckily because of the Western oil situation has come back somewhat, but still is probably close to 50% down. So these things have long-term issues, and as we're moving forward, there's more and more companies within our marketplace that are now stopping and questioning what's going on. And it's very disconcerting for us and obviously for the businesses, the industries that we represent in the marketplace. So thank you so much.
Again, I won't suck up much more of your time here, but it's mostly a summary more than anything else. When you have time, please do read through this again. I know some of you that have been in office for quite a while have seen this before, but those of us that have been recently elected, like I said, I was 2 years ago. So I would encourage those of us that have been recently elected to please review this, pay attention to it, and this is the most important part to me anyway. This is the most important part about what we're doing, protecting the region, not just a little bit of land in South Fargo. So with that, I yield the floor to any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Pollack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chad, thank you for your work on this. If I look at the stats for Cass County on page 11, and I also look at the stats for Clay County on page 13, would I be able to take for instance, the Becker County people, 1,369, and add it to the 615? And so really, it's not 1,369, but more like 2,000 people from Becker County work in Fargo in the area, or Fargo-Moorhead, I should say, in the area that's that's benefited by the FM diversion?
No, I think you're still at the 1369. I think I understand what the question was. I believe that's just still the baseline. It's part of the U.S. I actually got a phone call and an email into them as well. I never got a return because I'm clearly not that important. So I was trying to get some definition as to how that number originated, and more importantly, within the community. Because like I said, in Becker County right now, we say 1,369 people come here. They have a total working population of 11,404. I contend, and this is what I wanted them to define for me, that 13 is actually part of that 11. So the percentage of people working in that county is actually a much greater percentage than what I've told you. But I'd rather go with the low number than the high number, if that makes sense. I know I can defend the first. I think it's a greater number, but the census people didn't get back to me.
If I could, Chad, I think if you flip the page to page 13, where the heading is employed in Clay County but live in Becker, that would seem to me to be separate from the people who live in Becker and work in Cass County. So I think what Commissioner Pollock was saying is that in Cass and Clay,
Okay, I see.
you have
Both.
2,000 people.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah.
I thought we were just driving into just in Cass.
So really, when you say 10% of the population, really, it's more like 20, closer to 15%.
Yes, you could imply that.
Okay.
Because chances are those people would be working in Moorhead. It's doubtful that a disproportionate majority of those would be working somewhere in the rural areas. And these are non-farm payrolls.
Okay. Thank you, Chad. Thank you for your work.
Any other questions? I certainly appreciate the updates on this. As indicated, it will be under fmdiversion.com for anyone who wishes to see the detail. Just a comment that I would have that just is a repeat of what you've stated already. But when you look at what county has the highest number of people working in Cass County, it's Richland, out of the outlying counties, with 1,872. And as you're trying to point out, flood protection is not just about homes, it's about the economy, their economy as well, because they go back to their homes in these various counties. And I think it dispels a notion that we keep hearing that the alignment is drawn for one purpose only, and that's to have future development. I can't express it enough that our primary importance is flood protection for the economy as well as the people living within this area. Anything else?
Not a thing, sir.
Good report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eric?
Good afternoon, Eric Johnson. As I think you all know, the Federal District Court issued an order yesterday on the motions that had been initiated in early December 2014. What the order did was, first of all, significant claims that had been brought by the plaintiff in their third amended complaint have been dismissed. The state law-based claims against the federal government were dismissed, and one of the three claims, again based on state law, against the Diversion Authority was dismissed as a result of the order. Of course, the biggest topic of conversation that you've heard about in the media is the other aspect of the order, which was the request for a preliminary injunction against a preliminary injunction on the Oxbow-Hixson-Bakke levy, and the court did order a preliminary injunction, and I thought I'd just explain a little bit about what the order says and perhaps what it doesn't say. It stops construction by the authority on the levy of the Oxbow-Hixson-Bakke project, on the levy itself. It stops it. It's a temporary injunction and is intended to be in place technically until the judge releases it. But I mean, what the judge said in his order was that it's intended to be released when the Minnesota DNR is completed with their study. And so it is related to physical construction activity on the Oxbow-Hixenbach levee. What that order doesn't apply to would be a sort of private activity. So as we read it quite clearly, it's, again, the judge was trying to be very clear, I think, in saying this. We're talking about physical construction activity. If there's somebody building a house, private person, this order applies to the Diversion Authority, not to private individuals. They can continue with their house construction. It doesn't apply to, it's applied just to the Oxbow-Hixenbach project, not to remaining portions of the project, such as in-town levies and the work that's being done. You just heard reports about the lift stations and so forth. The injunction does not apply to those. And so, I mean, I think that's really the nature of the order. So, with that, again, it continues to be in place until ordered otherwise, but it would be in place while the Minnesota EIS is working.
Any comments or questions for Eric? None. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bruce?
I have a few items today to go through. This just goes through where we are on the budget and show you. Be looking for one change order today, and also a work directive totals up to about $299,000, and that would be coming out of the construction budget, showing that we have the funding available in the budget to authorize these if you so desire. The work directive is to add some additional budget for the owner's quality assurance testing firm, as we'll be formally coming to you with an amendment for that contract, but this $30,000 will just allow them to keep working on an on-call basis until we can get that amendment completed and to you at the next board meeting. That's for $30,000. The next is first change order number 1 for ICS, which is on the 4th Street pump station. And there's 3 components that make up that change order. One is some modifications to the high-rise parking, which is adjacent to that, and part of this project gets into and impacts their parking lot. So we're doing some modifications to try to minimize the impact to the spaces in their parking lot. There's power going to a warming house that had to be relocated due to the construction. And then there's also a storm sewer pipe that was going to be put under with conventional cut and cover type construction, but due to a water pipe material change once we got into the construction, needed to be bored underneath that. So the total for that change order is $268,555, with total change $298,555. So I can answer any more detail, or otherwise I'd look for, yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
The question that I have regards item number 2, reroute electrical service to the Park District's warming house to replace a line that had to be removed for the project.
Mm-hmm.
This item should have been known as the plans were put together. The other 2 items, reading them, I can understand why we would need a change order, but why do we need a change order to reroute known electrical service?
Sometimes when we go off previous as-built drawings and some not exactly, we don't expose all the utilities during the design to determine exactly where it is. So we go with our with either as-builts or utility locates in the field. Sometimes those are accurate and sometimes those aren't accurate. So the information that we had during design was not accurate. So we've occasionally on these smaller things like electrical lines and some other things like that, they can be different. Sometimes during design we will do some potholing, but we don't do that for all utilities. So it can wind up with some changes as utilities, as you get into the field and actually do the construction.
And I certainly understand that, but nevertheless, it seems
Yeah.
that it should be known.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, and we, during design, make those efforts to find those utilities.
I mean, electrical service to the park district for $50,000, it's hard for me to imagine that you couldn't run a whole new line from a whole nother spot for less than that.
And I don't have the detailed pricing that went into that. I know our team did look at it with the contractor and are recommending this.
And this has been through the city staff too.
Yes, we work with city staff closely on all the.
April, you want to comment to that, or?
I know that they have worked with city staff. We actually have Nathan Borboom, who sits on those construction meetings, and he is well aware of the change and recommended to me that it was appropriate.
Well, it just seems extension cord would be a lot cheaper, but a lot of money for.
The board may handle this together or separately.
I'll take them all as one and move to approve the 3 change orders.
The motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Any further?
We've had trouble with utilities on a lot of our projects, Ken, on some of our stuff on 19th Avenue as well, so it seems things aren't what people say they are.
Can you take the roll, please?
Mr. Vano?
Yes.
Mr. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Ms. Sobolik?
Aye.
Mr. Williams? Mr. Camp? Ms. Otto?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Roger?
A lot of the items have been covered by others from my outreach report. Just one thing that we talked about yesterday at our meeting was the cemetery mitigation and the possibility of involving a couple people from the cemeteries, representatives, to be a party to this cemetery mitigation, and as we go forward, look at the options that are on the table. And I did suggest at land management that we look for one from Minnesota and one from North Dakota. And land management agreed that that was probably a good path forward. I do not have any names to bring forward yet, but will hopefully by the next meeting bring a couple names forward of people that would be willing to be part of this process, mitigation for cemeteries. And so we'll be looking at next meeting for a possible motion. And from the website, it was a pretty active month during the voting process for the assessment district. Darren said there was a lot of activity, a lot of questions, and that activity now is gradually coming down, but it was a very active month. And as we go forward, we'll take on the next big item on the website and look for public input. That ends my report.
We had a fair amount of discussion in our commission meeting discussing the tax assessment vote and that, and it appeared to us sometimes that maybe people didn't quite understand it when we went through our final explanation. And I think Mark Borchardt also explained that even at the public outreach, a lot of people didn't come to those. So a lot of times when people were voting, they may not have fully understood it. Even our commission didn't fully understand it until we went through it a little bit more detail and the interest savings and the different things that happen with that, and the fact that the sales tax will be paying that assessment. So I think we had that discussion of, is there maybe a different way we should approach that in the future if we have any kind of public outreach, Roger? And I don't know. I mean, it's up to you. But we seem to try to hit everything, but yet I got several phone calls, and then when you finish the explanation, people would understand it, and then so then I can see why I would vote yes for that. But do you have any comment to that or thoughts on that?
Well, we did have 3 public meetings. They were announced, they were advertised, and then we also had a 4th hearing, and the hearing was required. The 3 public meetings are not required, but we felt as a joint board it was important to have them. It is sometimes very difficult to get the public engaged in these public meetings, especially if they don't understand the process. Maybe they just don't want to know. And definitely this process through the Cass County Joint Board, it's a state statute on how we set this up. We're dictated by the state statute on how we have to do this process, and it is different than what you're used to in town. In town, you just accept the special assessment that's put on your property. You don't really vote on it. So that was the difference, I think, between how we have to do it and how maybe most of the people perceived what a special assessment and how that works. And I'm going to make another comment too about, we've heard a lot about how it was, the indirects were, basically guaranteed the vote would go through. And gosh, as I look at what happened at your commission meeting, I don't think it was for sure. And certainly you had a couple members that really questioned the process, and I think one even made a motion to stay neutral and not have your votes even included in the process. So I haven't done the math to see if that would have made a difference in the vote, but certainly it wasn't a slam dunk, and I think your commission actually brought that to light. So it is the process that we are dictated to follow, and we followed that process after 2 years of some pretty intensive study and yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that I learned yesterday in the public outreach meeting was that this process saved $100 million. And so on a tax collection of $450 million, to save $100 million, I mean, that's incredibly significant. But I didn't know that number until yesterday, long after the voting actually had closed. That, it does tell us that it's the right thing, but it's just such a complicated issue that there's so many pieces of information.
And,
Commissioner Sobley.
I would just add, when this came up to our commission, I think it really shed light on the fact that not all 5 city commissioners sit on the Diversion Authority, so they're not hearing this at regular monthly meetings. And I think we have an obligation to go back and probably do quarterly updates. So all of our elected leaders are learning the knowledge as well, not just the few who show up at these meetings and hear it. So I think there's sort of a joint, each of us as elected bodies needs to be informing our peers as well as the general public.
That's a good comment. And another thing that was brought up at our meeting yesterday, our outreach meeting, was, we are involved daily almost in this project, but there's a lot of people that aren't. And to bring updates to townships that are being impacted or protected is an important part of this outreach. It certainly will take an effort, but I think we almost need to be on a systematic, now it's time to go out to the northern townships and have a meeting, explain where we are, so that they continue to understand what the process is. And certainly your commission also should be updated.
We'll take a tour bus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roger. Good discussion. Land management, Mayor?
Land management met today and has been making progress in a variety of areas of acquisitions and working with homeowners. Many appraisers have come in, and with the injunction, some things will slow down, but other things will continue as far as we understand that. The cemetery mitigation report was given, and we'd like an action item is to release that report. So as part of my report, I would like to have that as an action when we get done. The NDSU came back to us as well, and to finish their report in more detail, they had asked for increasing funding. So they had an ask of more money as well to finish that. And that was because they've got more data from actually the landowners in the area. So it'll be a more robust report and have more of that into it. And then the right of entry and cultural resources is continuing to make some progress. So would we need 2 action items out of that?
Yep.
So the one would be a motion to release the cemetery mitigation report.
So moved.
Second.
Is this a roll call or just all the?
I think this one we can just.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And then NDSU Ag Impact Study Amendment, they went up additional amount of money from 91,000 to 135,160.
You have that
$7.
document in front of you as well.
And does that change the timeline of the outcome of their report?
It can,
Mr. Chairman, this morning they indicated that they still intended to finish by the end of June.
Okay.
If I could probably explain a little bit about what's going on here. NDSU started out using information that they gleaned from their peers within their ag community in the college and from county extension agents, and they gathered this information and the information that they had on file and started their report. Well, as this process went through, they actually wanted to vet the process with actual producers. And so they invited, I think it was 10 producers, 10, 12 producers in the impacted area, and had a meeting and had specific questions that they asked those producers. And from those questions and from those answers, they then brought that back and could see that they would have to rerun their model, inputting the information that they had gotten from the producers. So part of this increase is the ability then to rerun this program with these changes. And it's a very large program. We've been told several times that the computers have actually ground to a stop because there's just too much input or too much output, and they have a very large computer. So they were pretty amazed that that their computer couldn't handle it for the size of what they were working with. So this is some of the additional costs that we're looking at approving.
Entertain a motion to approve the additional dollars.
Move to approve.
A motion, do you have a
And
second?
I'll second.
Okay. Commissioner Pollak?
And based on your comments, Roger, this has nothing to do with the expanded study that, as directed by the legislature. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Which is what I thought we were
Yeah.
working on.
Any other questions?
it's probably a roll call.
Take the roll on that.
Mr. Vaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Pollak?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Ms. Sobolik?
Aye.
Ms. Otto?
Aye.
Mark? Give a little update.
Mr. Chairman, members of the authority, in front of you are land management summary, our normal monthly report on activities and changes in the last month. Hit on a couple bullet points. We're nearly completed with the appraisal process for homes in Oxbow. 36 of the 40 homes in Oxbow have been presented initial offers. We're waiting on 4 appraisal reviews from the Corps. We closed on another opportunistic farmland purchase. We're waiting for appraisal review completion from the Corps on several appraisals, both the houses in Oxbow and some vacant lots. Park East, the apartment complex near here that we need to buy for levee work in town, relocations continue. At present, approximately 70% of the tenants have vacated or made plans to vacate, so that's moving on a pretty good schedule. Where the timeline is July 15th. We'd like to have all the tenants out of the building, and that is our scheduled closing date. We are looking at moving the closing date up further. There's good reasons to do that, but the tenants' date to be out of the building wouldn't change if we move closing up further. We have new purchase agreements in the Oxbow area, and we have some easements added to the need list, and we're kind of sorting through what we can and can't do as a result of the injunction, and we expect to have more clarification on that in the days to come. So, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Mike, my pleasure. Finance Committee report. Good afternoon. The Finance Committee met yesterday, and we'll have some action items a little bit later, but we'll go kind of over the finances. So far in 2015, we've spent about $20 million. Cumulative since we started with the diversion project, it's a little over $100 million. Our 2015 approved budget of $224 million. This current month, we spent about $3.5 million. $38.5 million to date. That's from October 1st. And we have outstanding encumbrances of $72 million. So we have $112 million left in our budget to spend. State aid summary. I added in the $69 million that the 2015 legislature has approved. So we've got state funds appropriated of $244 million. And we have $176 million of that left. This is just the in-town levy work that's being done. There's contract amounts for $41 million, and left to be paid on that about $33 million, $34 million. If you remember last year, we took out a loan through U.S. Bank for $50 million. Included with that was a total of $100 million commitment from U.S. Bank. The county took out the original loan, and we've withdrawn all that money, or drawn down all of that $50 million. We still have about $13 million on hand, but with the closings that are coming up and the expenses coming up over the next few months, Fargo has been working on the next $50 million loan, and as part of that, the Diversion Authority has to authorize a drawdown for them. When they actually close on the loan, they have to do an initial drawdown. We discussed that yesterday, and we'd like the Diversion Authority to authorize a drawdown in the amount of $5 million. You see the suggested motion.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions? Take the roll, please.
Mr. Vaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Pollak?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Ms. Sobolik?
Aye.
Ms. Otto?
Yes.
We have a couple other items that Eric Johnson is going to discuss. One of them is the Third Amendment to the Joint Powers Agreement between the City of Fargo, Cass County, and Cass County Joint Water Resource District, and then the Ernst & Young contract. But first, I'd like to talk about something we also discussed yesterday and are asking for approval, is we looked at our
our fiscal year, we started out with October through September 30th, and we think it would be more convenient if it was on the same fiscal year as the city and the county, which is January to December. So that's part of the recommendation that we have. And then the other part is we think then we'd have to change the budget year. So what we're looking at is we have the current budget, we'd like to extend that from the 12 months to the 15 months, same total dollar amounts, just extending that for another 3 months. So then our next budget would be approved for the 2016 calendar year. So I'd like to get a motion on those two.
Is there a downside to that?
No, originally when we started this out, we tried to put it on the federal fiscal year, and we really don't see any purpose to that anymore. We'll just have it on the same fiscal year as the city and county. It makes it a lot easier for everybody's record keeping.
It'd be a lot easier for me just to figure it all out. Are you looking for a motion
Yes.
now?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the fiscal year be changed to coincide with that of the city and the county.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any question?
Excuse me, do you want to extend the budget at the same time?
Extend
Same.
our previous budget to the 15.
Yes, yes,
Included in
that's
that.
really is considered part of my
Okay.
motion.
And, Mike? Okay. Take roll, please.
Mr. Vaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Ms. Sobolik?
Aye.
Ms. Otto?
Yes.
And Derek will present the next two items for you.
Thank you, Michael. Well, you may recall at the last couple of months, but particularly the last meeting, I was up here and we were talking about the impact of the decision by the Buffalo Red River Watershed District to approve part of the fiscal year 2015 budget, but not the entire budget that was approved by the other 5 member entities. And I think it was the chairman that asked, you know, what would this mean to the Diversion Authority? And I tried to explain the situation that's now before you, which is that because the Diversion Authority's financial authority is sort of limited to approved budgets that need to be approved by the 6 member entities, it still continues to have financial authority for those things that are approved, but also has programmatic authority and policy-making authority, decision-making authority in all other respects. It just seemed appropriate to identify at least an interim workaround so that we have a clear decision-making connection between appropriations and the expenditures to which those appropriations are applied. And we already have in place a mechanism that we simply need to modify in order to accommodate this sort of presumably interim workaround. Interim being, according to the Buffalo Red River Watershed District, their concern was just doing anything while the Minnesota EIS was still being studied. And so, if I may, I'll just digress for a minute and talk a little bit about the history of the North Dakota entities. And I put on in front of you just before the meeting a memo which is really just a chronological recital of some agreements and amendments that have already been approved. You know, currently the funding for what is going on right now is coming either from the sales tax of Cass County or the city of Fargo or state participation funding, and so the funding is coming from North Dakota entities. And what we have done back in 2010, kind of early on while the project was still being under study, was the County of Cass was at that time still waiting for a vote on their sales tax that was going to be used to fund this project and other flood expenditures. And the city had just approved its sales tax that was to be devoted for these flood things. And so the city and the county came together along with the Cass County Joint Water Resource District in 2010 to really identify a cost participation agreement. And so what it said was, simply put, for every dollar spent by Cass County, Fargo would match it, dollar for dollar. And that's been the ongoing relationship ever since. In addition, of course, we have other sources of funds, like I said, from the state of North Dakota, for example. Also in 2010, as part of this process, there was a need for an agreement that became a joint powers agreement, where those same 3 North Dakota entities came together to form an agreement to ask for the assistance of the Joint Water Board to move forward with sort of some preliminary work on this project. And so that agreement was a joint powers agreement, where they shared a power and directed one of the member entities to undertake a task. It also provided, of course, for reimbursement to the joint board to the extent they expended money toward this end. And then that was amended again just later in 2010, to expand the scope of it, not to include all things more related to the project for the joint board. Then just last year, as the Oxbow-Hickson-Baki project came on board, that agreement was amended. Again, the North Dakota entities, joint powers agreement, amended to include the Oxbow-Hickson-Baki project as part of the task order for the joint board. They were willing to take it on, and that's the agreement whereby they did take on that task. Of course, this body also sort of identified that the task could be undertaken by the Cass County Joint Water Resource District. So in any event, that's the status of the history of these 3 North Dakota entities and the agreement they have. They currently have a joint powers agreement. And so what is presented to you is a third amendment to that joint powers agreement between those 3 entities. What that would provide is the appointment of a board. Tried to think of a snappy name, a title for the board. We've got a number of boards in this project, but I settled upon the Dakota Metro Flood Authority, and the board would be a 7-person board, kind of the same makeup as the North Dakota entities are on this board right here. In other words, 3 appointed by Cass County, 3 appointed by the City of Fargo, 1 appointed by the Cass County Joint Water Resource District, to a 7-member board. We visualize it probably as being the same, presumably Cass County, Fargo Water Board appoint the same people who are seated here right now to also be on this Dakota Metro Flood Board. And the purpose for the board is to address this appropriations authorization. And the general concept would be that when this Diversion Authority Board meeting were to end one Thursday a month, that board would convene a meeting and take up those items that were just acted upon by the Diversion Authority and give ratification and approval of those items. And so what this third amendment would do then is provide that backstop, interim, workaround appropriations authorization while we're still kind of waiting for Minnesota EIS to finish their process. One thing that's important to clarify is that that second amendment, for example, is still being, Mark Rodschog was up here just describing what they're undertaking. The intention of this board is not to sort of interfere with the protocol or the procedure that we already have in place, where the Cass County Joint Water Resource District is meeting when they meet regularly to approve acquisitions and things of that nature. It's not intended to alter that in any way. The intention is for this board to act really in conjunction with the Diversion Authority to ratify their decisions and give that appropriate appropriations authority on financial matters. So what's before you is a third amendment. The Diversion Authority is not a party to this agreement. It's the 3 North Dakota entities, but it seemed appropriate to bring it to you first for sort of approval in concept and form, and assuming you give your blessing to it, then we would take that document and circulate it between the 3 entities for approval, and then appointment of the members to this Dakota Metro Flood Authority Board. And if that happened between now and the next meeting of the Diversion Authority, we expect that group would meet, sort of ratify any of the expenditures that have occurred during fiscal year 2015 and past, and move forward from there to take care of any matters that come before it.
You have the document as well as the suggested motion. Yes, Mike.
A few questions. Eric, why couldn't you simply amend the agreements to modify the budget approval process? For instance, weighting it like the assessment district was done. If you're not putting any money into it, you have no vote. If you're putting in half the money, Fargo and Cass County, they each have 50% of that vote. Why could it not be done that way?
It could be if you, but you would need to have the approval of all 6 member entities. And it seemed like there was some struggle on the part of the Minnesota side to deal with this issue. And this was proposed, I guess, again, as kind of an interim workaround. Clearly, I think at some point, and we've kind of known this one since we started the Diversion Authority Joint Powers entity, at some point we'll have to address some issues like that so that there isn't a sort of veto power. But for now, I guess the thought was we would try and figure out a way to just handle the interim issue we have.
And maybe Jared can comment on this, but in talking to the Water Board Authority, part of their concern is that, in a sense, that they don't want to get ahead of the governor or to get ahead of DNR, thinking that they might not be able to approve it because the DNR study isn't done yet, or there might be some legal, if we get through some of the discussions that we've had with them. So the idea was that theoretically when the DNR report is done, then that should drop away, and then we should, in a sense, be able to go back to business as usual, which would be they would look at our stuff and approve it. So I think that was part of the idea, Mike, is that, yes, you could go to what you're talking about and do a major rework, but then you have to go back to each commission, the Cass County, and all the different groups and get their formal approval of that change.
True, but understanding they don't have any financial stake in it, they have more or less veto power. They're vetoing it at this point if you're requiring 100% approval by all entities. The other question I'd have is, would this Dakota board trump then this board, and what's the role of this board then? It sounds like that they have all the decision-making powers. They're granted all the powers that this board is. Does this become just an advisory council then?
No, I don't think so. This board still has all of the authority as a non-federal sponsor and has all of the authority to make programmatic decisions and policy decisions and really to act on financial decisions. It's simply the purpose of this Dakota board is to just provide a backstop to the extent that this board would be expending money in excess of what the Buffalo Red River Watershed District had approved in their approval of the budget.
But could the Dakota board rescind a decision? You know, they say they affirmed you want to, approve an expenditure today. Could this Dakota board then trump that decision?
There's a possibility, yes, that the Dakota board could have a decision that was at variance from the Metro Flood Board.
Ken?
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend approval in concept and form of the Third Amendment to Joint Powers Agreement as proposed.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further questions? We'll take the roll.
Mr. Vagno?
Yes.
Mr. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
No.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Ms. Sobolik?
Aye.
Ms. Otto?
Yes.
Okay, next, we have been working already with Ernst & Young, who have been providing assistance to us relative to how this project might be financed ultimately when we receive appropriations from Congress, from the federal government, so the project moves forward. They've been actively involved, really working as a contractor for CH2M Hill, but it's necessary that we separate that relationship and form a contract relationship between the Diversion Authority directly and Ernst & Young. Have been sort of involved in discussions about how that contract reads for the last few months, and what is before you is an agreement in the form of a letter by which, countersigned by both parties, approves certain general terms and conditions. The topics of discussion are the usual things in dealing with consultants, which are limitations of liability, open record issues, and things of that nature. The idea is to get your approval of this contract. And in terms of the tasks going forward, this will be much like the master services agreement we have with the HMG and with CH2M Hill. We'll identify task orders and get your approval on those task orders moving forward. Wouldn't surprise me if we have the initial task order before you at your next meeting to identify the role of Ernst & Young as they move forward into the project development phase.
Just an FYI to the board, Tom Rusakis, who's identified here as the Senior Managing Director of Ernst & Young, has been working with us at the federal level. In our recent trip to D.C., he was present and very, very impressive in terms of the meetings with OMB and others. So I highly endorse that firm as well as Mr. Rusakis.
In 70% of the private-public partnerships in the United States right now, Ernst & Young has been part of them. So when we went to OMB, they had very great interest in it, and we actually had the policymaker for OMB in the room talking to him and 4 other staffers about how this might work. What the government is a little confused about is if the Corba is a project and it's $1.8 billion, and if you try to do a private-public partnership and it's $1.4 billion, where do you come up with $400 million of savings? So the engineers probably can figure it out, but it took them a little while to figure all that out. So it's nice to have somebody with his expertise, because they've done some projects in the Denver area and some other areas that they did explain that to the people. And of course, federal government's always a little worried getting their toe in the water on new projects, but he did a very good job.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a dollar amount, or are we just putting them on retainer for 5 years and they'll come back with a statement of work and a price?
It's a good question. It isn't specified here as, so much per year or anything like that. It's either project by project or an hourly charge.
Move to approve.
And we would then know that,
Ahead of time. Yep.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other questions? Take the roll.
Mr. Vaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Ms. Sobolik?
Aye.
Ms. Otto?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Then the last item is the bill approval. That's a little bit higher this time because of a Joint Water Resource District bill of $2.7 million for work done down in Oxbow and in town.
Move to approve item 10E.
We have a motion. We have a
Second.
A second. Anything further on that? Not. Take the roll.
Mr. Vaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Ms. Sobolik?
Aye.
Ms. Otto?
Yes.
Any other business?
Don't we have to do C, loan drawdown request?
That we did.
First part.
Oh, yeah, we included that in, so I included that in.
You did it.
Any other business? Yes.
2 things. Question, probably, how many in-town homes have been purchased and destroyed or moved?
By the city, not
By the
related
city.
to the Diversion Authority.
Well, combined, whatever I'm just looking for a total number,
About 300 since 1990.
about 300. And I believe the county has done about 100, 200? Okay, about 200, okay, all right. And the other thing is not a question, but more a point, and that is, with the ruling by the federal judge, I understand that the circumstance is still being analyzed, but my position is as a member of this board, I don't want to be in a position that is challenging, or that I don't want to come close to the line of doing something that is prohibited. I would just want to make sure that we fully comply with that order, and that we don't want to be in a position where our compliance might be questioned. And
Understood.
I just want to get that out there so that I don't want to step over that line.
Right. that's obviously the reason for pulling back one of the items that we were intending to approve.
Sure.
So,
Appreciate it, thank you.
And I can, if you like, I can give you a quick affirmation of that.
I think part of our concern, Kent, is if you talk to Mayor Nyhoff, you have a lot of people in his community that were anticipating certain things happening this summer. So it's how do you draw the line to, if you're in the process of acquisition or buying, or where do you do that? So I think where we have to remember, there's some people in this too that, you know, if we can come to somewhere, won't go over the line, but what is acceptable?
I agree.
Yeah, and thank you. That's a very good comment, and make no mistake, we fully intend to honor the court's order. It was helpful that the court, quite consciously, I mean, was very purposeful in saying the intention of this is to be limited to these physical activities, and we think that was very helpful. But we're already in contact with opposing counsel just to make sure we're on the same page on things, and so I appreciate that comment, and that's certainly our intent in terms of interpretation of the order.
Good, and I appreciate those efforts and comments as well. Thank you.
You said you had two things.
I asked
the
about
first
the
was the
homes.
homes, yeah. Anything else? Next meeting is June 11th. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.